Thanks for listening to this presentation. This is one in a series of presentations around core concepts for HITRUST validated assessment. This presentation is on policy and procedure scoring. My name is Stephanie Madhok. I'm a director with HITRUST Compliance Services with Accorian. Accorian is a full services cybersecurity advisory firm with focus areas around cybersecurity strategy and consulting, compliance services, including assessments for HITRUST, SOC 2, ISO, etc., and penetration testing following a number of different approaches. Please feel free to reach out for all of your cybersecurity consulting needs. Unlike other popular assessment types, HITRUST assessments are quasi-quantitative assessments. External assessors are charged with understanding and complying with scoring methodology. Assessed entities can help ensure that they're achieving the best maturity scores possible and the criteria for certification by first understanding basic concepts of the scoring criteria. Today we'll focus on policy and procedure, but first here's a quick overview of key scoring facts. The following applies to 11.0 assessments and above. And first we'll look at the R2 scoring side of the presentation. HITRUST R2 assessments are tests of control design and operating effectiveness. Control design is represented in policy and procedure, and control effectiveness is represented in implementation and ongoing measurement and management of the program. There are 5 maturity levels in a HITRUST assessment: policy, procedure, implemented, measured, and managed. The HITRUST assessment methodology establishes requirements for quantitative evaluation of each maturity level. Each maturity level is weighted, as you see here on the screen: policy at 15, procedure at 20, implemented at 40, measured at 10, and managed at 15, for a total number of available points of 100. The measured and managed maturity levels are typically not tested in a validated assessment, and that's because you do not need to test them in order to achieve certification. And there's a lot of additional work that goes into collecting evidence, testing evidence, QAing that assessment for the measured and managed maturity levels, and most organizations choose not to undertake that level of assessment. The threshold for passing a HITRUST assessment is 62 points based on the average maturity score of each domain. Certification is awarded based on the average maturity score of a domain. If the score for any domain is less than 62 points, HITRUST will write a validated report but won't issue certification. Gaps and corrective action plans are based on requirement statements and control reference groupings. Control reference groupings are functional groupings of control requirements. They're defined in the CSF. They can appear in one or more domains in a HITRUST assessment. There certainly are more nuanced pieces of information about scoring within a HITRUST assessment, but those are sort of the core concepts around scoring. For the R2. For the E1 assessment, it is a review of operating effectiveness where only the implemented maturity level is tested, and therefore the score, the highest achievable score, is 100. All 100 points are weighted toward the implemented maturity level. And the highest score achievable is 100. The threshold for passing an E1 or I1 assessment for certification is 83 points based on the average score of each domain. Certification is awarded based on the average score of each domain. And if the score of any domain is less than 83 points, HITRUST will write a validated report but won't issue certification. The minimum score required to avoid a gap or corrective action plan at the requirement statement level is 80 points. Gaps and corrective action plans are identified based on requirement statements and control reference groupings. And again, there's sort of more nuanced information about the identification of gaps and corrective action plans. So please reach out to Accorian for more information on that. For both assessment types, risk acceptance is possible in lieu of a corrective action plan. And those are at different different minimum scores. So for an R2 assessment, the minimum score that you have to achieve in order to accept a risk in lieu of a corrective action plan is 62. And then for an R2 for an E1 or I1 assessment, the minimum threshold is 75 points. Here we see the HITRUST scoring rubrics for policy and procedure. They can be found at the URL at the bottom of the page. There are two elements to consider in testing policy and procedure. There's strength and coverage. So strength is represented on the left side of the scoring rubric, and coverage is represented across the top of the scoring rubric, as you can see here with both policy and procedure rubrics. Criteria for strength is discussed on the back side of the scoring rubric. So if you were to go out to this URL and bring up the scoring rubric, you would see the criteria for evaluating both policy and procedure. Under this current scoring rubric, as long as the requirement and required policy elements are addressed in a document identified as a policy, standard directive handbook, or other similar document, the strength criteria and mandatory nature of the requirement statement is met. Strength criteria are considered to be a documented policy and are rated at tier 2 on the strength side of the scoring rubric. The coverage aspect of the rubric is addressed when a policy or procedure includes and addresses all the evaluative elements in a requirement statement. For example, if there are 4 evaluative elements in a requirement statement, but just one element was addressed, the coverage aspect of the will be evaluated at low. So even though the strength might be at tier 2, if coverage is rated at low, the rating given is somewhat compliant, which translates to 25 points awarded. In the event that no policy or procedure can be identified, the external assessor may consider whether the organization has an undocumented policy or procedure. To meet the criteria for an undocumented policy or procedure, the assessor might conduct one or more interviews to confirm the requirement is well understood by those required to implement them. The assessor may observe a responsible party implementing the control and may conclude that the control is implemented but unwritten. In that case, a strength of tier 1 may be given. To meet HITRUST strength requirements for procedures, there must be a documented procedure that addresses the operational aspects of how to perform the requirement statement. And the procedure should be at a sufficient level of detail to enable a knowledgeable and qualified individual to perform the requirement. When considering what operational details to include in the procedures, consider drafting statements that address who, what, where, when, and how questions. Keep in mind that all evaluative elements of the requirement statement must be addressed in the procedure. Thanks for listening to this video. Hope to see you next time.